Welcome back, everybody, to Catapult Your Business, where we help catapult businesses one question at a time to help grow and scale to the next level. Welcome to all the entrepreneurs that chime in every week to listen to a question that can help you as an owner get to the next level. I have got a really special guest, actually one of our talented clients who has 6 different brands. We're going to talk a little bit more about that and what's going on and kind of where we're going. But the question we're going to talk about today is, how do you scale into multiple cities? After you build the foundation and you get your systems and your business in place in one location, how do you take that to the other locations into the future so that you can grow and scale past your own location? So to help us get into that conversation, I want to first introduce our client, Dana Fountain. Dana, welcome to the call.
Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. Glad to have you. I know you work with our talented Mara. I know I speak on behalf of Mara and just say thank you for letting us be along that client journey, that entrepreneurial journey with you and helping you grow and scale your business.
Yes, I'm so grateful, and it has helped me so much already. So happy to be here.
I love it. Well, Dana, tell everybody give us an idea. Like, what is Pin Me Up all about? Like, give us an idea of what the business is all about that you're running.
Yeah. So Pin Me Up Chicago is an on-location hair and makeup agency. We've been servicing Chicagoland clients for about 13 years now. We started before the day of Uber and everything coming to you. So traditionally, you would have to come into a salon to get a hair or makeup service. And we started doing on-location hair and makeup services before everything came to you. So I think it was a little ahead of the curve. But because we've been doing it for so long, we are the largest hair and makeup provider, on-location hair and makeup provider here in the city. And we've done a pretty good job of keeping a really good reputation. So every year the business just keeps multiplying. So I couldn't be happier. And then even time and place in the world, social media and how people approach photo shoots or meetings or anything. People just get hair and makeup more and more every day. So, so I don't think our business is going anywhere.
No, well, and I know you've got a great reputation in Chicago, kind of this first location you've got off the ground, and it's expanded from there, right? You've got several other businesses you've been able to kind of build and grow off of that infrastructure. So congrats to your success. Kudos to the continued growth. And I know there's so much more and you're just getting started in your journey. So fantastic. We'll talk a little bit for everybody listening in of how you can learn more about Dana or Pin Me Up at the end of the podcast. But we're going to jump in and see if we can't help Dana continue her scale. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, come into the business thinking, oh, I just want to build this location. And then you start to realize that it might actually become easier to start to scale into multiple locations. So Dana, I want to bring it back to you. Why do you want to take this outside of just Chicago? You obviously own the city now. Why do you want to get into other major markets?
Yeah, I mean, every year we do more and more events, but it has come pretty apparent that the reason we can service so many events is because we have a system. We have a system that works. I've been training hair and makeup artists from the inception of this business, and it can definitely be recreated in other markets.
Yep.
Also, some of our advertising avenues that we use, we can take the experience and the years in business and all of our reviews and things like that and easily move that into another market and potentially blow some of the competition out of the water because we've just been around longer. So
well, you've got more expertise now.
Yeah, I think that it might be rather easy. And then being in the wedding business, it is kind of a niche market. So you're always appealing to new brides, right? Like most people don't get married more than once. Some do, but it's a lot of first time clients, and so just having that reputation that it's a big day, you can trust us, we do this. It's an important way to obtain a client. So
I love it. I think what's really important too for everybody listening in is that you can build a 7-figure, sometimes even an 8-figure business by location, right? But really the faster way to scale is most likely to kind of diversify the eggs in the basket, right? By saying, all right, I built a 7-figure business now in Chicago. How do I figure out how to take that and get several more to be able to establish to an 8-figure business, right? And that's kind of the next chapter. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs listening in are trying to figure that out. Is it better to keep focusing in on my root business, or do I start to scale in multiple locations?
Yes.
And again, grabbing more market share at some point becomes more difficult than opening up a new location to capture the new market share. So that's the thing we've got to work through. Now, I have to set the expectation, and Dane, I already know you know this, but for all of our listeners listening in, it's so crucial that before you make the decision to scale to other locations, you have your main house where you start the business really fine-tuned. And I know you and Mara are deep, and you're almost through that process of getting exactly the way you want, so it is set up to scale, which is where I know this question is coming from in terms of how to get to other locations. So people listening in, it's like, yeah, I'm going to grow by growing more locations. Well, you better make sure your current location is a high-performing team, very efficient, very profitable, so you can always look back and say, this is what the example and role model is for what we're going to build in all of our other markets and cities we move into. So just make sure everybody hears that. Dana, what have you thought about, right? Like there's a lot of different models and a lot of different ways to scale into other cities. I'm going to present them here in a moment, but what have you thought about doing already?
So I've actually been approached by a couple different people in the beauty business and outside of the beauty business that has presented me with some opportunities. So one of my mentors was in the franchise business. He owned 174, We Care hairs around the country. And he approached me and said, you know that your business is a franchisable business.
Yep.
And I said, okay, interesting. So he presented me with one scenario that he wanted to partner with me on.
Sure.
And then as just kind of time and place evolved, then I did my own research about, licensing agreements or, there's many different ways to share your business model. And so some of the questions that were brought to me was, do I want to sell my business? Do I want to take what I've created and put a dollar amount on it and sell it? Or do I want to continue to control multiple locations or multiple cities out of my business? And so part of why I got referred to Cultivate was because I had that question. And I know there's many ways to do this, and I don't know the right answer yet, but I know that there's many ways to scale your business. So
absolutely.
I don't know which one yet, but we're going to find out.
We're going to find out maybe on this call, or you'll at least leave with a bunch of things to think about, and then you'll make the call. But how funny if it, 10 years we look back and go, thank God we did that podcast, Dan, and we had that call where we figured out what model we're going to take. Well, a lot of people get faced with this question, and I think franchising can be overwhelming. They don't realize that there are so many other opportunities to scale between multiple locations, from even just a W-2 model, right? You can put boots on the ground, pay them to be a part of it. Usually you tie them into some type of profit sharing or some type of revenue share model, so they act more like an owner since you're not going to be there in the day-to-day, and they're more tied in that way with an employment agreement. Number 2 is franchising, like you shared. There is licensing, which you already shared. One that maybe you haven't thought of is more of a joint ownership model.
Yep.
Where it's not actually about taking a percentage like the franchise or the licensing program works, and instead it's truly finding partners in each of the markets, and you own a percentage of the business, but they are the boots on the ground owner. You are the investment and the intellectual property owner, where you're guiding them and leading them to do what you want to do. And what I will tell you, some things to think about is, how big do you want to get this, right? And how easy do you want the business to run are actually 2 of the most important questions I would encourage you to ask yourself. And I'll just give you a couple quick examples. Franchising, you can go fast, but your business changes very quick. You're no longer focused on the service product offering. You are now actually focused on recruiting franchisees.
Right.
And your business is selling the type of business you have in a box over and over and over again for a set amount of money, and then an ongoing, small percentage. Because of normally where the percentage falls when you build the franchising for your royalty rate, you need to get to a very wide scale to make this really worth it. You mentioned your mentor over 100 units. I also led close to 100 units when I built, my franchise system before I started Cultivate in my background. You have got to go to a large enough scale to make it meaningful. I have seen people run 6 or 7 locations at a very high end and stay their focus on the client service and do the same amount of revenue and profit as you might do actually on the franchise side, right? Because your revenue turns in to the royalties in. Your revenue is very tiny for that reason. It's no different than having a 5 to 10% equity stake in all of these businesses. So you have to go really big. So you have to think, will there be enough cities? Will we be able to get to enough locations to make that a reality and get to the size we want? And is that what you're excited about doing? The licensing side is very similar to franchising, right? You sounds like you've done some research on this. What do you feels like a compliment or a pro or a con about doing licensing over franchising from what you've researched so far?
So one of the things that we face in this business specifically is because I have salon businesses in Chicago that are separate from my on location agency. We have a home to live out of without overhead. So we don't necessarily need like a brick and mortar place.
Like a bolt on.
Yeah. And so when we start thinking about licensing agreements, at some point, Pin Me Up's profit margins are pretty fair because we don't have a lot of overhead in any real estate or anything like that.
Right.
So my salon models that are here in Chicago, they complement Pin Me Up, and that's, to your point earlier, why I have so many brands, because they kind of parallel each other. And so one of my other concepts is called Pure Beauty, PEER Beauty. Sure. And that space is a beauty co-working space that Pin Me Up lives out of.
Sure.
So when we were thinking about going into other markets, I was thinking about moving both of those businesses into other markets so that Pin Me Up can stay very little overhead, but have somewhere to live and thrive out of that also kind of cultivates the independent hair and makeup artist that needs to power Pin Me Up.
Sure.
So as we're thinking about licensing agreements, a couple of things came into play was, do we have market partners like you mentioned? Do we find, Susie in Minnesota who has a salon loft that wants to also recruit her makeup artist?
Bolt on. Yep.
Right. And then do the trials out of her space. Or do we go into different markets from a real estate standpoint? Like I have a lot of real estate. So, in some cities, it makes sense to rent a space. In some cities, it might make sense to purchase a space and have other revenue streams out of that space. So for me, it came down to every city's probably going to be different.
Right.
And so the research I learned with licensing agreement is different. So it doesn't have to be a franchise where this is the model and this is what you're selling. Every licensing agreement can be different. So as I was thinking about different markets, that was kind of my idea, having different agreements with different markets depending on what the market's needs are. And then the opportunities are going to be different in different markets. If we go into Indianapolis, it might make sense to buy a office loft in Indianapolis. Right. But if we are in New York City or Orange County, it doesn't make sense to buy, a storefront that, this business would operate out of.
Yeah.
So I know we have options, but I know every market is different.
What I found has been a really common trend for people migrating into some type of model that allows them to get to multiple cities is they usually start with a licensing agreement to try out 2 or 3 different types of personas of people that might bring this into their business.
Mm-hmm.
But then you do really identify this is the one that I want to take and scale. Because the problem is on what you just described there, Dana, is you can do that 6, 7, 8, 10 times. You start to get past that. It starts to get so complicated because each business need, the way you've structured it, needs something different from you and your team.
Right.
It becomes impossible long term, and it's always going to require you to be in that business to manage it, most likely. So I think it's okay if you view that as like, I want to go try a bolt-on. I want to go try with somebody who's going to open up a shop. I want to try with somebody who's going to add the loft. Go try out those few different portions, see what works, and then connect. But I will tell you, the question I think you actually have to ask yourself is, if you're going to do that, Do you do it via licensing or do you do it via joint ownership?
Right.
Because the thing that people don't think about, yes, more flexibility, but you know what the other downside is? The other person also has more flexibility. It is much tougher for you to be able to hold accountability if they decide to break up with your approach and do it on their own. You have a much harder time to maintain that output together in the partnership if they decide to do that versus franchising. You're more locked into a steady agreement, and on joint ownership, you have a percentage of that business.
Are you getting the advice you need for your business from this episode? Do you want to get more than just one question answered and have it customized to you and your business? Well, Cultivate Advisors works one-on-one with thousands of business owners every day. Let them help you scale your business today. Don't just listen to this episode. Take action and go to cultivateadvisors.com to see which advisor you get matched with and receive a free 2-hour business assessment on how you could scale your business to the next level. Act now at cultivateadvisors.com.
Another thing that was brought to my attention too was with franchisees, my time, like you said, would be spent selling the franchise. Like,
Well, you might hire somebody. You might hire somebody to recruit, recruit and sell franchises. But yeah, it's a very different type of business.
And it's like my day-to-day business would be different. Not in a joint partnership or licensing agreement or whatever. I might still operate on how I do right now.
Correct.
Training and, doing the things I do for my team here. If I move into a straight franchise situation, I'm now a salesperson selling a franchise.
Well, at first you would be, but Mara would probably have you hiring a pretty talented franchise expert to come in and help you sell franchises. I don't know if that's the role you would take, right. But I think it's important that you understand, like, you're running discovery days where people get to meet the business and come shadow it. Like, the thing you have to understand is it's just such a high volume business to make franchising work. So I always just tell people, if you're going to go, you go franchising because you want to take over the entire country. Your vision is so large that you just want to be in every single market, and that's what's important to you. Franchising is the best way to make that a reality. But if you're going to stop at like 12, 15, 18 franchises, and if anybody that owns 12 or 18 franchisees are listening in, they're like, this isn't true. I'm just going to tell you, majority of the time, the franchisor is not profitable enough, and they could have made the same amount of money by having 2 or 3 really ran locations that you own, right?
And for me, that sounds like more of how I would like my day-to-day to be, is similar what I do now. Because, right, like, I enjoy what I do, and I feel like I'm pretty good at what I do, and that's how we've gotten here.
But I don't know that franchising is your path, and even licensing isn't that different from franchising. If I were to really suggest what I would look at, I would actually more look at either deploying somebody boots on the ground into a location, hiring somebody, putting the overhead up front to say, I'm going to hire this manager to help me get this off the ground. I'm going to make them think like an owner. I'm going to give them a small equity stake in this business as well, while we pay them a salary to survive. And that's how we're going to get off the ground.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to go find somebody who already has a salon and do a joint ownership. Hey, let's start an entity together. You own this percentage. I own this percentage. We're going to partner up to help make this become a reality. And I will include a licensing agreement that we can use our brand, since it's already established and has everything behind it. But at the end of the day, this is our business together. You've now gone from this 5-10% royalty rate to, it might make sense to structure a 25 to 30% ownership stake.
Sure.
And you're also more, the con. Now, I was in franchising for a lot of years. The con to franchising has always been said, we're taking a percentage off the revenue as a franchisor. So the franchisees might not be making enough money to validate paying that percentage. When you take this, so there's more breakups, in my opinion, in franchising. But when you get to the ownership structure, you're tied to profit. So you know how that other owner feels, because you also aren't gaining as much profit as you want from the business being ran. I don't know if this is helping put some things kind of in priority for you or putting things in a box for you, but what's sticking out as we engage in this conversation right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's looking very clear.
For you, at least, yeah.
Yeah, it's looking very clear. I mean, you're right. Franchising, potentially the person that brought this idea to me said, you could be in 100 cities. Sure, potentially. But
You
then
would need
to be
to make
successful,
it
you'd
work.
have to be in 100 cities.
Right.
So the joint partnership idea is what I do now. I have business partners. I have business partners in different salons. I have business partners, in a hair product company. I have business partners in my event space.
Right.
So that's a little bit more natural to me. And it also can be really clear with roles and responsibilities too.
Yep.
So that sounds like not as foreign as taking this model and completely selling it or changing it to do something different for me.
You can always convert. You can always convert, right, to that next level of going back to franchising too. You can always, start up the franchise system after you have 6 or 7 other locations and convert them. I've seen it done a ton. So just be mindful. Now, there's one other really interesting model you may want to think about. You can also do what I'm going to call a roll-up. Now, any lawyers listening in would be furious that I said it this way, but I'm going to speak it in very layman's terms. You can create a roll-up business, meaning you go out and actually start to acquire salons and you buy it with an equity transfer. It doesn't even require a lot of cash. There's not a lot of cash that exchanges hands. What you're doing is, hey, join my group of businesses. Based on the amount your business is worth, you'll receive this much ownership of the entire conglomerate. And we're going to build a book of all these owners and businesses that are these essential salons that also have this additional pin me up aspect. And that's what gets really, really neat, because now everybody's sharing, and your value prop isn't buy pin me up. It's join in and remove the risk. What if your salon struggles for a year, or what if something takes place? We're now all in a pool. And because the business becomes so much bigger, so much faster, your ability to exit is going to be much higher, and everyone will make more money, right? Because what do you want? Do you want to own 100% of $1 million business, right? Or do you want to own 10% of a $50 million business, or 3% of a $50 million business? People forget how much more that's worth by being a part of a larger conglomerate. And so that can be what you sell. So not to overcomplicate it, but that's one more idea to throw into the bandwagon of how you could structure it. What I will tell you is, and this is for everybody listening in, it's important that you don't grow over your skis. Most owners think just grow or die. That's a really fast way to die. Listen to the last part of that sentence: grow or die. That means a large percentage of people, their businesses do die. That's where the phrase came from. So I think we only see the optimistic side. The way you're describing it is more of an ease into the scale. You can go find 2 or 3, and you can decide, do you want to do a roll-up, or do you want to just take on an ownership percentage and help them grow and scale into a new service offering? I think both are exciting and both are very scalable. Biggest piece of advice: pick your persona. Make a decision. Am I going to go do salon bolt-ons, or am I going to start people from scratch? And the reason why is my advice to you is get multiple in one type so you can leverage what you build. You can always then go launch another type when you're a little larger and have more resources.
Thanks for tuning in to Catapult Your Business, where Cultivate Advisors is helping you catapult your business one question at a time. Are you running your business, or is your business running you? At Cultivate Advisors, they'll match you with an expert advisor and do a free 2-hour deep dive for your business. This will give you the clarity you need on how to get your business to the next level. Cultivate has worked with thousands of businesses. What do you have to lose? So head over to cultivateadvisors.com and sign up for your free 2-hour session.
So that was kind of an aha moment for me right there.
Okay.
Because one of the challenges I foresee happening with Pin Me Up is, in Chicago, I have a pretty big network of beauty business professionals.
Sure.
And I pull from already seasoned, trained professionals. So going into other markets, this roll-up idea could alleviate the need to have to train people from scratch, because they already have, or they potentially will have, the experience needed that doesn't need much grooming.
How many people you already know how to recruit.
Right.
You already know how to recruit all these talented artists that, help bring hair and makeup, to life. Right. So it's like, why wouldn't you just do what's already in your core competency and build the scalable business out of that?
Right.
And again, you can always transition that to franchising. You can always transition that, to these other elements that we're talking about. But it feels like this is going to be in your wheelhouse and the easiest way to take that next step. And again, everybody listening in, people are always optimistic. You've got to eat the elephant one bite at a time, right? And it's, if you're not totally sure that you want to get this into 100 plus cities tomorrow, stay away from franchising.
Now, let me ask you this. Is franchising a little bit of I don't want to say dated, but it's not as,
Did you say dated?
Dated. Like,
Yeah.
like older, not as invented way to do business,
I was in franchising for 12 years, so I hope it's not dated. Here's what I will tell you. I think that franchising, there's a different reason to franchise now than once was before, right? Before the big internet boom, I think franchising solved something completely different than it does today. With the internet, you can recruit people, you can find people so much faster in all these markets. That's removed that element that franchising had a hold on, where it helped you run more locations from afar, where you couldn't have this speed of communication. Let's just acknowledge that, right? However, there are laws and protections around the franchise agreement and how the structure works that is still, you can't get that level of agreement by any other structure, in my opinion. Okay. And in which case, that becomes very valuable, right? And again, if you're like, I want to get to 100 cities, what we're talking about doing by having a joint ownership model or a roll-up model is going to be a complete pain. This is more of a program to get to 10 to 20 cities. Got it. Right? So it'd be impossible to keep up. You'd have to go back to a more franchise model that's more prepared for a larger scale. So it's not dated. It's just that more people probably would not have done the joint ownership and would have done the franchising model in the past. And I think now, because of the internet boom, more people are realizing we can do a joint ownership or some type of simple roll-up structure that gets developed versus having to take the royalty fees to be able to sell your widgetized business.
Got it. And now with these different business models, I've done a bunch of research on franchising and how that looks different for every state and the legalities that come with that. Now with joint ownership, what does that look like?
You're going to get a really good operating agreement built one time that has all the rules and the ways you run the business. That's why I said you don't want to shift. You really want to have kind of a set way you go into the partnership so you can scale it. And you're going to build it one time, and it's established, and that's the ownership of the business. And you're actually going to more focus on controls of like, how do we all have access to accounts? What's the reporting that's going to kick out so I know that I'm earning the right percentage? How are we going to make decisions on budgetary at the beginning of the year so we're aligned and never in a fight, right? No different than what you do with all your other business partners right now with your other brands that you've established here throughout the city of Chicago. So again, creating some consistencies and knowing exactly who you want to be and what type of partners you want to connect with and what the roles that you will serve for those partners is what is going to be most important to align, because franchising requires you to put it in a box. Joint ownership, there's more flexibility to do whatever you want. And that actually is a negative, because that flexibility can distract you and you get shiny red ball syndrome and you take on things you just should not take on, and instead stay inside the box that you establish.
So from a cost standpoint too, when I was approached with the franchise idea, it was pretty
expensive.
Yeah, like expensive, but I was told the dollar amount. It costs this much to do a franchise agreement in each state.
You'll spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on the legal side. You'll hire tons of.
What's the cost difference between operating agreement to a franchise agreement?
I'm no lawyer, but I can tell you from building a lot of operating agreements, you can get a decent operating agreement built for $7,000 to $10,000. You can keep reusing that agreement. And for every deal you'll do, you'll probably have another lawyer, bill 2 or 3 hours for every deal that you do. But again, it's the you don't have to, you're filing in each state, right? Like for your company, like it's not overly that crazy. You'll get a registered agent. So you'll pull in to help you manage all of your state entities. You'll double or triple the cost of your accountant each year. But again, franchising, the legality cost has got to be 20 to 30 times higher than what you're going to see on the joint, because you're going to get to keep leveraging the joint ownership with slight tweaks to each state. And ultimately, you're going one by one. Again, it's just you're trying to get to 10 to 20 cities in this model versus 100 cities. And that's where it really, really stands out. So
got it.
We can talk for days and days, and I know we will between myself and Mara, Dana. I think for everybody listening in, the key is to slow down. I hope everybody just heard a really good example of, hey, we can shoot to the moon or we can go step by step. What's the right thing for the right business owner at the right time? And picking the right model to go into multi-cities is vital. I've had franchising in tons of cities. All of our advisors and our team is spread throughout the country, but I stayed the W-2 model to pull that off. There are multiple ways to go about this. It's about picking the right path for you with the right risk tolerance. And Dana, you're asking all the right questions, which isn't surprising based on the talent and the success you've had to date. So fantastic. I know we're going to talk more offline, Dana, but for everybody listening in, they may have an interest in what your business is up to. Do you mind sharing, where can people learn a little bit more about Pin Me Up?
Yeah. So our website is pinmeupchicago.com. On Instagram, same thing, at pinmeupchicago. My personal kind of landing page is danafountain.com, and that has a little roll up of all my businesses.
Yeah.
And
Love it. Well, if anybody, maybe somebody in another city is listening to this and they're a salon owner or they've thought about getting in this space, go check it out. Or if you happen to be in Chicago and listening and you need makeup or hair, you definitely need to go to pinmeup.com. So, Dana, fantastic. Thanks for joining us and bringing this question. We'll continue talking a little bit more offline. But for everybody listening in, continue to catapult your business. Continue to invest in the skills needed that will ultimately allow you to run your business versus the business running you. We'll see you next time on Catapult Your Business, where we help answer one question at a time to propel your business to the next level. That's all, everybody. Thanks again, Dana.